One evening in 1896, Colonel H.G. Shaw and his friend Camille Spooner were riding a horse-drawn carriage back to Stockton, California, from the small town of Lodi. As they traveled along a country road, their horse suddenly came to a stop. In the darkness, Colonel Shaw could hear the horse breathing nervously. At that moment, he looked up and saw three strange beings, each about 2.1 meters, 7 feet tall. They appeared very thin, with pale white skin resembling polished ivory. Their ears and mouths were small, but their eyes were large and bright. Colonel Shaw described them as being similar to humans in many ways, but they were definitely not human. They had a strange, indescribable beauty. This encounter was reported on the front page of the Stockton Evening Mail on November 25, 1896. It is considered one of the first modern sightings of tall white aliens. At the time, most people dismissed it as just a story, believing that poor Colonel Shaw had experienced a hallucination. No one could have predicted that more than half a century later, these tall white aliens would allegedly become partners with the U.S. military and even blend in among us. In the 2020 documentary Walking with the Tall Whites, retired U.S. Air Force veteran Charles James Hall, worked at Nellis Air Force Base, shared his extraordinary experiences. Today, we will talk about his story. If you're unfamiliar with Nellis Air Force Base, here are two key terms: Nevada and Area 51. Who is Range 4, Harry? Charles Hall was born and raised in rural Wisconsin near Madison. He joined the U.S. Air Force in 1964 and underwent basic training. In his final test, he ranked first in his class, especially excelling in mathematics, where he set a record-high score that impressed his instructors. He initially thought he would be assigned to his preferred destinations in either the United Kingdom or Germany. However, he was instead sent to the desolate desert, because Nellis Air Force Base selected him for a specific role: meteorological observer. Well, he hadn't realized that such a job required such a strong mathematical background. Regardless, Charles was easygoing and quickly made friends at the base. One day, his friend Dwight recommended a great job opportunity: taking charge of meteorological observations at the Indian Springs Gunnery Range. There, he would have his own pickup truck, could go wherever he wanted, and, best of all, there were no supervisors watching over him. Oh, and Las Vegas was nearby. Plus, he'd receive extra pay. Charles was grateful and asked why he had been chosen for the role. Dwight replied with a meaningful look: "Because you're the only one who can handle what's out there." After chatting for a while, Dwight suddenly said, "Charles, summer is coming. You need to be on the lookout. Range for Harry likes warm weather. In winter it hides in the mountains, but once the weather warms up, it comes down to Indian Springs and runs along the dry riverbed." What? Who is Range 4, Harry? And why is it running around in a nuclear bombing range? Is it insane? Charles was confused. Dwight then told him about the legend of Range for Harry. According to the story, Range for Harry was originally a horse. In 1954, when the Nevada test site detonated a nuclear bomb, the horse wandered too close to the blast zone. Although it was not vaporized, it underwent a mutation, and its body began emitting a white glow. Dwight warned Charles never to approach Range for Harry if he ever saw it, because, according to base officers, it was no longer just an ordinary horse. It had become something else, something more like a human, with large blue eyes and a long white tail. Charles thought this was just a prank on a newcomer and laughed out loud, saying he wouldn't fall for it. However, Dwight, anticipating his reaction, added, "I'm serious, Charles. Do not take risks. The last guy who got too close was John Zimmerman, and I don't want you to end up like him." A strange medical file. Before heading to Indian Springs for his new assignment, Charles underwent a routine medical examination at the base hospital. The nurse in charge was his friend Sandra. Casually, he mentioned Range 4, Harry and John Zimmerman, expecting her to laugh along with him. Instead, her expression changed. Sandra opened a safe containing medical records of soldiers who had been discharged due to illness. She pulled out a file and told Charles, "I shouldn't be showing you this. But since you're going to Indian Springs, you need to know what's out there." It was John Zimmerman's medical file. Inside were 4 photographs showing a man suffering from severe radiation burns. Zimmerman had claimed that a white horse had attacked him, but that was the only thing he could remember. Charles stopped laughing. Range 4 Harry was real. A strange handover. When Charles arrived at Indian Springs, he met Sullivan, the previous meteorological observer, who was a cheerful and humorous man. They got along well, until Charles suggested visiting the weather station at the gunnery range to familiarize himself with the environment. Indian Springs had 4 ranges, and when they arrived at the weather station at range 3, they realized no one had the key to unlock the door. So, Sullivan simply estimated the wind speed and direction instead of actually measuring them. When Charles suggested checking out ranges 1, 2, and 4, Sullivan hesitated. He agreed to visit 1 and 2, but outright refused to go to range 4. At range 1, Sullivan refused to leave the truck. "If you want to check the weather station, go ahead," he said. "I'll keep watch from here. If I see anything, I'll drive back to the base for help. If that happens, lock yourself inside the station and wait for rescue." Charles, puzzled, asked if he was afraid of range for Harry. Sullivan suddenly snapped. "What range for Harry? That's nonsense. It doesn't exist." Despite his words, he gripped the steering wheel tightly, looking terrified and ready to flee at any moment. Inside the weather station, Charles checked the logs and discovered something strange. Sullivan had never actually entered the station. All previous weather data had been completely fabricated. In fact, not just Sullivan, but his predecessor and the one before him had all done the same. Why? Charles would soon find out. The first encounter? In the following days, Charles spent his time alone at the gunnery range. The place was desolate, yet peaceful, and he had never seen range for Harry. One day, under extreme heat, about 120–130 degrees Fahrenheit on the ground, he stayed inside the weather station with a fan blowing. Outside, the desert was silent except for the occasional chirping of meadowlarks. Then, suddenly, he saw something white moving among the sagebrush in the distance. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, but after blinking, he saw it again. It looked like a little girl trapped in the shrubs. Grabbing his gloves and a bottle of water, he approached and called out, "Little girl, are you lost? Are your parents nearby? Do you need help?" As he cleared a path through the bushes, the girl emerged, and what he saw shocked him to his core. She was about 1 meter tall, wearing a silver jumpsuit and boots. Her skin was chalk white, her body extremely thin. She had radiant platinum blonde hair and large upward slanting blue eyes, twice the size of a human's. She had only 4 fingers, with no visible nails. Suddenly, Charles heard strange bird-like sounds all around him, forming a circle. Then, he saw a towering figure, another tall white being, rushing toward the girl and hiding behind the sagebrush, watching him. This was just the beginning of his encounters with the tall whites.
Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Share it, because some stories are meant to be discovered together. And stay curious. I'll see you in the next chapter.